Morning, sir. Our travel time to Shanghai is 11 hours, 15 minutes.
Told you we should have taken the faster flight.
I think the board prefers you wear a more conventional suit to these company meetings.
You can't outrun your past.
Friday, tell me I didn't just imagine that.
Negative, sir. Sir, incoming!
A little late, don't you think? Friday, suit up, now!
All systems online.
Time for the hero thing.
Sir, hostiles inbound, 10 o'clock.
So much for a hero's welcome.
On your right.
Any idea who we're up against?
You've made your share of enemies, sir. I'll need more time. Above you.
That's how it's done.
Threat neutralized.
Good. I have a plane to catch.
PlayStation.
What is up, New York Comic Con? Yes! Welcome to Marvel's Iron Man VR Behind the Script. I am Josh Soleil. We're going to get into this game and talk about all the juicy, good stories, gameplay, and all of that. So to join me on this stage is Ryan Payton, creative director of Camouflage, and Bill Roseman, VP and creative director of Marvel Games. Oh, look at that flight. Look at that flight. It was stabilized, and punch down. That was nice. Oh, cool. Gentlemen, hello. Long time no see.
That's right.
Greetings, Josh. How are you?
Last day, you holding up okay?
Yeah, doing my best. Too much yelling.
I like that T-shirt. On brand.
I mean, I like your guys' T-shirt.
Hey, twins. We're twins.
See, these are pretty cool, right?
Woo!
Ah.
All right, so let's start with the basics.
Yeah.
For those of these fans who don't know Marvel's Iron Man VR, what is Marvel's Iron Man VR?
All right, well, Marvel's Iron Man VR is all about taking the awesome things about playing as Iron Man, the flying and the shooting and the rocket punching and the ground pounding and that three-dimensional HUD, right? And also being Tony Stark, and then smashing those together with the great things about VR and PlayStation VR, which is those move controllers, so you can do all the flying and the shooting and the ground pounding and rocket punching, and then also with the VR headset, you're in that three-dimensional HUD. And finally, with VR, there's a sense of immersion in VR, right? So being Tony Stark, not just playing as Tony Stark, but being Tony Stark and looking down and seeing your body and seeing your hands and hearing your voice as Tony is really all about what the game is all about. So it's just not the action and the Iron Man simulation, it's also about Tony and that full AAA level VR content in a full campaign as well.
Yeah, I mean, simply put, I like to think about it is it's the ultimate wish fulfillment that lets you do what you pretended when we were all 8 and 9 years old, and maybe today, is putting you inside the armor. When you put on the PlayStation VR headset, it is just like putting on Tony Stark's helmet. And yes, in addition to that, you get to be Tony Stark. You get to be that millionaire inventor playboy. You get to walk around the mansion. You get to go to all these international hot spots. But there's something special about you put on that helmet, and it's the first time you've ever really got to experience having that light up HUD. You've seen it on screen, you've seen it in the comics, but when you put it on and it wraps around your face and you get to fly and blast as Iron Man, you really believe because you are Iron Man.
I got to play this game at San Diego, and I got chills when in the beginning when you see all the logos coming up and you're going along the water and you're gliding down.
Exactly.
The feeling you get, you encapsulated it perfectly. But from the beginning, did you just wake up one morning and your team was like, Iron Man, VR, done, we got it?
Right.
Like, how did you come up with that decision?
Yeah, so the way that the game all came about is that through Bill's boss, Jay Young, over at Marvel Games, he met me at E3 and he said, hey, we're interested in Camouflage working on a VR game. in the Marvel Universe, and we said, yo, we're interested. And we came back to the team, and they said, well, but if it could be Iron Man, what could be more perfect for VR than Iron Man as a character, right? So we went back to Jay, and Jay said, hey, thanks but no thanks. Iron Man is our crown jewel for VR, basically. And you guys are good, but you're not to that level that I want you to be at. I'm like, okay, challenge accepted. What would we need to do in order to convince you of that? And he said, well, you're not going to get it, but a great pitch, and then also an amazing, the best prototype I've ever seen of VR for Iron Man. And the team, just like Tony in the cave, their backs against the wall, and they just worked really, really hard on an incredible prototype that in 2 weeks really just communicated what Bill was talking about, that joy of flight, that sense that you are Iron Man, that suit, even if the world was just in gray box, right? We got that sense that players were playing as Tony Stark, even in this rough capacity. So when we took it down, we rented a minivan out of Seattle Airport, drove all the way down to LA with the VR equipment in the back seat. We pitched to Marvel. Thankfully, they loved it, and the rest is history.
That's right. That really shows that at Marvel, we love to give opportunities to talent across the board in all our divisions. We have a whole history of saying to someone, if you have the passion and the desire and the love for the characters and the talent, then we will give you that shot. And they took that shot and they hit a home run. And we said, you nailed that wish fulfillment. That number one is, you put it on, do I feel like I'm flying? Do I feel like I'm blasting? And from day one, they killed it, and we said, you got it, go.
Well, it was like you were Tony Stark, right? Someone tells you no, and you were like, I'm going to make this. No one's going to stop me.
Basically.
And it pans out beautifully. And talking about the flight, let's get into the flight mechanics of this game.
Sure.
You nailed it beautifully. How did you go about doing that?
Well, we got really lucky with one of our lead gameplay engineers, Troy Johnson. He just, from that first day, he was in the VR equipment trying to figure out how to make this feel natural. And that's like really the key here, is that just like with Audie's design of the suit, just like with a lot of things about Iron Man, and the things that I love about Iron Man is that it's not just fantasy. There's a lot of science behind the fiction, right? And the way that the flight mechanics work in our game is very physics-based. We're not making up a lot of stuff, and that is like the true secret sauce of the game, is that if we were to kind of simulate or imagine how flying would work in VR and have the player do a lot of stuff that didn't feel natural and wasn't physics-based, your brain would know. Subconsciously, you would actually start feeling not so good, right? But one of the great things about how our game feels so good when you play it is because it all is physics-based. And when Josh was here yesterday talking about it, he was right. He said, wow, the level of minutia that the controls have, he didn't expect with the PlayStation Move controllers. And it's true, like they're all based on proper laws of physics.
And speaking of the Impulse armor, we have some lithographs we're going to give out at the end of this panel, so stick around. We got a few of them left over to give out to some fans, because Audie did a fantastic job with that.
Yeah. Oh, and just to stress who Audie is and why it's such a big deal. So Audie was the artist who, back in the 90s, drew the Extremis storyline in the Iron Man comic book that Warren Ellis wrote. And really, he was the first one to draw the suit, and when you saw it, you said, oh, it's bold, it's dynamic, it works on the page, but I also understand that there's a man in there, and I understand how the armor works. And so he was the one, actually, that was drafted by the MCU to work on the first Iron Man movie. So he's the one that was a huge inspiration for the MCU. So to have an artist that we love, who has done the comics, who has worked in film, now to come full circle, we love working with him again, and then to help us design the armor, and then create this print is an awesome thing, and it just shows you how much the team cares about authenticity, about Marvel and getting it right, and when you can get the actual creators to come on board, that's something special.
And let's go into this armor a little bit, even more details. You're now creating an armor for VR.
Right.
What is that process like?
Yeah, so just as Bill was saying, we had that kind of classic inspiration, and Audie helped modernize it, right? But when he's working on the comics, for example, I would imagine that maybe that's where the work would finish. But then the team went and started 3D modeling that suit, and then we put it into VR, and we realized that when players twist their arms around like this, how does it actually function? Yeah. And some stuff would break. Yeah. And so then we call back Audie and say, hey, can you change this aspect of it so the players can rotate their arms more properly? Or when they put their chest piece out, like if they pump their chest, it actually flexes properly over here around the clavicles, right? And to Audie's credit, he was not only open and willing to do it, but he was really excited to do it because we were actually stress testing how the suit would work in the real world, right?
Yeah, and that's the magic of VR is that everything has to function, it has to work. You have to look down, and as Ryan said, be able to move your arm in any direction. And that was part of the genius of you working with him. He engineered it just like Tony Stark, so that it actually functions. Talking about the classic inspiration, when you look back at the 1970s Iron Man suit, so the color language, they were so smart. The red parts were the gauntlets, the chest pieces, the boots. Those were the hard and protective parts. And then the yellow parts, the gold parts of the suit, were the arms and legs, the flexible parts. So they really thought it out. It wasn't just random color placement. So we were like, how can we take inspiration? Because we were very, and we'll talk about it, we were very inspired, the whole team, by, there was a famous story called Demon in a Bottle by David Michelinie, who was the writer, and Bob Layton, the artist and co-writer. And that was a big, big, big inspiration, and that was the suit in that story. So how do we take a suit that was drawn 2D on paper, bring it into the present, make it three-dimensional, and then make it work in VR is
Right.
quite the challenge.
Absolutely. And thankfully, the team at Camouflage, the developers, we were up to the challenge, but only to a certain point because our team was trying to figure out on our own and working with Bill and working with Tim, and to a certain level, we got like it kind of blur your eyes. You can kind of see a lot of the similarities, but it wasn't until Audie came in there and then really added his design background to really flush it out and make it a really clean and powerful looking suit that we're calling the Impulse Armor.
What I also love is the team was very much inspired by Italian sport cars.
Oh, that's right.
Because everything that Tony makes, it's going to work, it's going to be excellent, but it's going to look good. So there was a ton of pictures. I remember the whole mood board of these cars. So when you actually look at the chest, that whole chest piece is very much like the hood of a car. That was a lot of the inspiration. Everything is streamlined, everything is beautiful, everything is functional, but it's sexy as heck.
And one last point on it is if you see like the black, kind of like these kind of rubber parts here.
Yeah.
This is specifically to allow players to stretch their arms out. And also each player has different body types. And so that's where a lot of the elasticity comes from for the players to kind of fill the suit in as they will. If they're 4.5 feet tall, if they're 6.5 feet tall, it doesn't matter.
Players get to first time get to be in PSVR in the Iron Man armor. The first time ever.
Yeah.
How do players get to make it unique to themselves?
Well, yeah. So a big part of being, of creating an Iron Man VR game is the Tony Stark experience and the fact that he's an inventor, genius inventor, and giving players access to that garage, right? So very early on in the game, we have players kind of roam around the mansion and eventually get access to the garage, and that's where they can see the suit in third person, right? And that was another challenge we had to face trying to do storytelling for an Iron Man VR game. Is that by virtue of it being VR, in most cases, you are in first person. So you don't actually get to see the full armor that often, right? So we felt like for the game, the garage was that really important opportunity for players to see all the work that they've done to customize the suit, to change their decos, to add and swap different weapon types, or different augments, and then see their work before they start taking it on and playing it in first person.
Right. I mean, that's what's so unique about VR and about the game is that, in most games, you're in the field, you're fighting, you're doing all that action. What I love about this is in addition to that, as you say, you get to walk around the Malibu mansion, you get to go into his garage, and there's so much storytelling through visual things. Everything was thought about. What's framed? What's on the walls? What's on his desk? What are all these items that you can interact with and look at? And the team did an awesome job of really applying thought to that, and it's all specific to Tony. It's all Easter eggs. It's all storytelling. So that's another fun aspect of just being Tony Stark and walking around this space and touching things and looking at things.
Exactly.
One thing you mentioned, Ryan, is you are the camera. It's not a third-person camera behind you. You are the camera. You are doing the storyline. So how did you make all these decisions for this truly immersive experience? Mm-hmm. 80 years of Marvel history.
Yeah, I think a big part of it was because you are the camera, because you are the hero in this VR experience, we knew that we couldn't have these big epic set pieces, these third-person CG cinematics where lots of action's happening, where you got lots of enemies and lots of supervillains on the screen. We really felt because it's VR, because you are the hero, we wanted to tell a more intimate story. So we do have a more limited set of supervillains, and that's supervillains. We've only really talked about one, but also just making sure that even though the scale of the game is quite epic, is that we want to make sure it's a very personal story to Tony, and that the interactions you have with our supervillains are very up close and personal as well.
Yeah, I mean, I really like that we focused on the foes, that we really dig deep into that relationship between Tony and Ghost, and really focus on that, and really showcase why Ghost is one of the greatest Iron Man villains of all time. And even though you say, I mean, I think there are moments when you talk about filling the screen with a ton of villains, but there are moments when you're flying and those drones are around you. Like when you're at the helicarrier and the drones are everywhere, you're trying to...
it's freaking crazy.
And you're trying to save the plane and they're all around. It really shows you how difficult... It's like everyone thinks, oh, it should be easy to be Iron Man. You're in your armor and you're just shooting, but it's just because you're in the armor doesn't mean everything's going to happen automatically. You have to make choices. You have to aim. You have to make it happen. So the armor is just as good as the person inside it. And so that's where the player comes in. How are you as Iron Man? What are you going to do to your suit? How are you going to upgrade it? It's so cool on the gauntlets. There's many things you can swap out. There's all sorts of missiles and bombs that you can pick that give you different offensive and defensive capabilities. And it's up to you to decide, how are you going to play? What's your Iron Man?
Right.
And how are you going to use those things? Because they don't just go automatically. You have to decide
when
to fire at the moment, where you're going to aim, all that.
Oh, hey, can I borrow your mic to do a demonstration here? One of the really cool things that the team came up with was using the PlayStation Move controls. Most games when you're shooting in PlayStation Move, you're kind of doing this, right? But they thought it's more natural for players to feel like they're actually holding the repulsor, so you hold the controllers up like this, and so that's how you fire repulsors. But a lot of like rockets come out of the forearm of the player, right? So they had this great idea that instead of having the weapon change be a button press, what if players shoot their repulsors like this and then tilt their remove controllers down and then fire out of here? So it's that's all credit to the team. And at first, I hated that idea, and they beat me down, and they were totally right.
But it's another example of immersion, that you are actually doing the motions that Iron Man would have to do.
And it's not just Iron Man, there's also Tony Stark in this game.
Right.
Yeah.
and players get to play as Tony Stark as well. How do they play differently?
You got your big action moments, right? Your big missions that can take anywhere from 20 to 45 minutes in terms of like the different big set pieces we have. And then interspersed between there, you get your Tony Stark campaign moments. And that's where the suit comes off, and you look down and you see your full body Tony Stark there. And now you're exploring environments and you're interacting with a lot of classic Marvel characters.
Right.
And we want to make it so it wasn't a strictly linear story experience as well, because again, you're in VR and you want to like play with stuff. You want to kind of poke at the boundaries of VR. So we have these really great set pieces, these great stages that players have always wanted to be in, like the mansion, like the garage.
Marvel was so unique, starting back in the 60s when they brought the Marvel Age with the heroes. They, Stan Lee and Steve Ditko and Jack Kirby, they were determined to put the human in the superhuman. And it was revolutionary at the time. They made you care about the person before they got their powers. You know, you like Steve Rogers before he gets the super soldier serum. You meet Peter Parker and you like him before he's bitten by the spider. In our case, you know, you meet Tony, you care about Tony before he goes into the cave. And so those moments, I think the writing team, Brendan Murphy and Christos Gage, who came in later, did an awesome job of making the Tony moments just as important as the Iron Man moments. And that's what we love about Marvel. We care about these people that are inside the uniform. We worry about what's happening up in the sky because we care about them when they're on the ground, and their supporting cast. So all of the scenes are all driving the story forward, are upping the drama, are exploring who Tony is as a person. And again, to talk about that supporting cast, it's not just Tony. You get to interact with his AI Friday. There is, of course, Pepper Potts. There is Nick Fury, who you meet in the helicarrier. And it's really these different people, including Ghost, who really challenge Tony, push him forward, challenge him to be the best person he can be. Ghost is the one that really pushes him. She challenges his worldview. She's saying that, no, you can't just turn the page and build upon your past to try and be your better self. She is the ghost from the past. And Tony's like, no, all of us. Every day we have an opportunity to be our best selves. We may have stumbled yesterday, but that doesn't mean that today we can't get up and move forward. And that's a very inspirational thing. And Ghost really challenges him with that. And in the same way, I think Friday and I think Pepper all challenge Tony. He's got this sort of support team. It's really the women in Tony's lives who are behind him, who support him, who challenge him, and you go on this journey and you realize, Tony is he's an egocentric guy. He truly believes that he himself can save the world. That's a noble thing, but he needs to realize that you can't do it alone. And it helps to have a team around you.
Well, should we cue up the story trailer? I think it's time to show that Tony's at the heart of this story.
That's right.
So we show these fans the story trailer that we showed earlier at Madison Square Garden, which is gorgeous. Let's cue it up right now.
I used to wonder how you did it. Lived in this empire built on pain and suffering.
More than a dozen people are dead after a missile attack involving Stark Industries.
Why'd you stop selling weapons, Tony?
I needed to sleep better.
Start drones incoming on an intercept course.
I told you your old weapons would be the death of you, Stark.
Love what they did with the place. Friday, you get a feeling we're not alone? And you are?
A ghost from your past. In death, victims have power. I speak for them. And we say, don't atone for your sins. Die for them.
PlayStation.
2020. I cannot wait. But let's talk about the inspiration. There's so many comics that I feel like fans can read. What was your inspiration from the comics to this?
Well, so very early on in the process, we knew that we didn't want to just create an Iron Man simulator. We wanted to create a great Tony Stark story that, and through Bill in particular, he pushed us in that direction, to making sure that it's a genuine, authentic story where it's not an origin story of Iron Man, but it does get into some very fundamental aspects of what makes Tony a great character. And then one of those things is that Tony being his own worst enemy, right? So we looked at a lot of those great classic comic books from the past, also some really great stuff from more recent runs as well. But for me in particular, it was really about the Demon in a Bottle series from the late 1970s that Bill mentioned earlier. I really love that because to me, leading up to that point, I felt like Tony hadn't really confronted with a lot of his own kind of personal demons, and watching him kind of go through that for me was really inspiring. And I'm a lot more of a fan of comic book heroes that maybe is slightly more grounded. So the fact that this larger than life superhero is being grounded by, in this case, alcoholism was really interesting, and really changed a lot of my perspectives on storytelling in comics, and I think a lot of people as well.
And I love that the team took that inspiration and then made it their own. As Ryan said, they looked at a lot of runs. They looked at past classic runs, and you mentioned the current runs, and
the Extremist,
the Extremist run, even the current run by Dan Slott, all the elements there, and the idea of taking those things, internalizing them, mixing them up, presenting them in new ways so that you as the player don't know where the story is going. And so you as Tony, whether you've read all the comics or haven't read a single comic, which I hope all of you never say that. But if you've not read anything, you can play the game, and it makes complete sense. It's completely accessible. You know who everyone is. You know all their relations. So you can play it just, hey, I'm an Iron Man fan, or I'm a VR fan, or I'm a Camouflage fan. I'm going to check this out. Everything makes sense. If you are a longtime true believer, it is chock to the gill with Easter eggs and point backs. But again, I like that you took things, mixed them up, modernized them, made them yours, and it's camouflages Iron Man.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and it's so much fun to be able to kind of just within reason and in a respectful manner, just kind of cherry picking some of those things that we really loved about the comics that fit really well with the story, fit really well with VR, and also pay some homage to some of the works that really helped inspire our understanding of Ghost, for example, like the Thunderbolts run that Bill worked on. There's a very, very subtle Easter egg from one of the comics that he worked on in one of the missions in the game that I should not spoil. But that's for like the really hardcore. So like Bill said, though, you don't have to have read the comics to really understand, to understand it all, like the high level. Like the high level of the story makes sense from beginning to end.
I also want to give a shout out to Christos Gage,
yeah, absolutely,
who wrote this story. Amazing, talented, legendary man. Now let's talk about the world building and the universe of this. Now, players get to fly around iconic Marvel set pieces and landmarks. What was it like to build this?
Wow, so yeah, building it was an incredible challenge because like when we were first, pitching the game to Marvel, and we had this very rough gray box city that was basically the origin point of this Shanghai mission that you just saw. We thought, well, we might have to create a few environments that are a little bit bigger than normal. But then once we realized just how fast the player wanted to fly as Tony, that's around about 250 miles an hour. And that's a very fast clip to be flying at a game that needs to look beautiful. And so pretty early on, the art team realized that this is going to be an incredible challenge, and one that we're still facing to this day. The fact that we want to create these really great-looking environments that have to be massive in order to allow the player to fly around them the way that they want to fly. So, for example, this helicarrier unit right here, this is more than the size of many missions that you would play in like a normal game where you're on foot, right? This would take up probably 3 missions worth of content on an on-foot game.
And it's fully built. It's not just the top. It's the bottom. You can go.
You can fly inside.
You can go through the bottom.
Yep.
It's all designed of again in VR. I'm not just watching this thing. I'm going to get up close to it. I'm going to interact with it, and it has to be 360 all the way around. So that was a lot of the inspiration of designing everything. Even the characters, really designing full body. What they look like standing there looking at you, foot to toe, front, back, all the sides, coming up close, seeing them from a distance. All that thought of building, and I would say the environments, the people, it was like a checklist. It just started with being a fanboy. Like, if I'm Iron Man,
well,
here's the places I want to go, here's the people
this.
I want to see, here's the things I want to do, here are the foes I want to face. It was just like, when we were little kids, like, hey, you want to draw an Iron Man comic? Okay, what do you want to do? And that's what we were. We just started as fans in a room with lists and what would be our dream Iron Man story.
Yeah.
I cannot wait. Guys, Marvel's Iron Man VR exclusively for the PSVR, coming out February 28th, 2020. You can also pre-order on the PlayStation, and you get all of these beautiful 4 deco armors, as well as 1 month of Marvel Unlimited. Terms and conditions apply. Check out marvel.com/unlimited. I mean, look at these beautiful
renderings.
took
the original Impulse armor, and we just did kind of Easter egg suits. So here's inspired by his very first all-gray suit, Mark I. Here's one very much inspired by his 1970s comic book suit. Here's one inspired by the Silver Centurion. And then this is the wild card one. We're like, let's just make one up and let the team go nuts. And then you get the ultraviolet armor.
And you guys can play this game at the PlayStation booth right on our left, 1854. Play the demo of Marvel's Iron Man VR exclusively for PSVR. Last word, last sentence you guys want these people to know about.
Yeah, thank you. Because one important point about the custom decos is that you don't just see them in first person. It's not just about applying them and now seeing them in the arms. You see them in the garage. You see them in third person as well. So players get to see just how cool and see just like all the level of detail the team has put into it.
I just want to say, if you love Iron Man, if you ever dreamed of being him since you were a little kid to now, this is your chance. You put on the helmet. You are Iron Man. Suit up in February.
Give it up one more time for Bill Roseman and Ryan Payton for Marvel's Iron Man VR exclusively for PSVR.